Welcome to the Puffy Plaid. This is my take on the buffalo plaid craze that I saw last year. I take two main colors of puff stitches, then use a contrasting and complementary color to outline the puffs. It simulates a plaid look. This hat is made top down, and I'd say is a beginner plus to an early intermediate level. We're going to use pretty basic stitches, and the ones that aren't quite so basic, I'll be sure and go over them with you while we're working the pattern, like a puff stitch or a single crochet back loop only. This pattern is worked in two different sizes. The smaller one is probably for an older child or teen, and the larger size is perfect for an adult. We'll go through both sizes as we go through. Let's begin. I like to begin my hats using the chain method. So I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook, and this is a 5.5 millimeter hook. If you prefer using the magic circle, that's fine, but I use this method. So I'm going to chain 5. It's 3, 4, and 5. And then I will join by inserting my hook into the first chain and then joining that with a slip stitch. Again, if you prefer the magic circle, that's absolutely fine. We're going to be starting our row 1 by working our stitches into this little spot right there. For row 1, we're going to be using half double crochets. For the smaller size hat, we'll work 10. For the larger size hat, we'll work 12. Start with the chain 1, and then we're going to be working our stitches into this spot in the middle. And it will become more defined as you go along, believe me. So I'm making the smaller hat for this pattern, for this video. And so I'll be working 10 half double crochets. If you're making the larger, you'll want to make a stitch count of 12 for this first row. So see, that hole's getting way more defined, makes it a lot easier. Again, I'm going to be doing 10 stitches. If you're working the larger hat, you'll be doing 12. So for the smaller hat, we do increases of 10 for a stitch count of 70 on our crown. If you're working the larger hat, we'll do increases of 12, and you'll have a stitch count of 84 for the crown of your hat. So for this row 1, I'm working 10 half double crochets into the loop. Okay, let's see, I've lost count. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I need one more. So here's my 10th half double crochet. We're going to slip stitch to join in this very first chain right here. Now for the crown, we're going to keep with one color, so you don't have to worry about changing colors yet. We're going to stick with our color 1. See you for row 2. For row 2, we begin our increase, and whichever size hat you're making, it'll be the same way. We'll start with the chain 1, and on this row we're going to place 2 double crochets into each stitch, and we're going to start by working it into the same stitch as your chain. So we'll put 1 double crochet, then we'll work right back into that same spot and put a second double crochet. So there's 2. For each stitch in this row, we'll put 2 double crochets in each stitch. So at the end of this round, you'll either have 20 stitches or you'll have 24, depending on which size hat you're making. But every single stitch, you place 2 double crochets. So we have 2 here, we have 2 here, and each stitch around, you'll place 2 double crochets. I'll pick you up here at the end. Okay, we're at the end of row 2. I'm making the smaller hat, so in my last stitch, my last 2 will be 19 and then 20. So there's 19 and 20. If you're making the larger one, it'll be 23 and 24. All right, for every row on this increase, every row, we're going to slip stitch to join in this first chain, like so, and that's the end of row 2. For row 3, we're going to start with our chain 1, and again we're going to place 2 double crochets in that same stitch as your chain. So there's 1, you go right back into that same place and put another double crochet. Now the next stitch you'll just place 1 double crochet. So we have 2 double crochets in the first stitch, 1 in the second. We'll repeat this again. 2 double crochets in the next stitch. There's 1 and 2 in that same stitch. Next stitch we place 1 double crochet. So we have 2 in the first, 1 in the second, 2 in the next one, 1 in the next. You'll do that all the way around. 2, 1, 2, 1. I'll pick you up at the end. Okay, here we are near the end of row 3. I have 2 stitches left. So for my smaller size hat, this will be stitch 28 and 29 in the same stitch, and then 30 will be in this last stitch here. Alright, that's my 30 stitches for row 3. Again, we're going to slip stitch to join in this first chain, if I can get it in there, and done with row 3. For row 4, we'll start as always with the chain 1, and we'll put 2 double crochets in that first stitch. So there's 1 and 2. So continuing with our increase, we'll put 1 double crochet in the next 2 stitches. So 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and 1 double crochet in the next stitch. So we have 2 in the first, 1 in the next, 1 in the next. Again, we'll do 2 in the next stitch, go back into that same stitch, put your second double crochet, and in the next 2 stitches you'll have 1 each. So 1 and 1. We'll continue this all the way around with 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. I'll pick you up at the end. Okay, we're at the end of row 4. So on my last repeat here, I'm doing stitches 37 and 38 in the same stitch. And then in my last 2 stitches, I'll have 39 and 40. Remember, if you're doing the larger size hat, you'll have a higher stitch count. All right, we're going to slip stitch to join in this first chain. Man, I'm a tight crocheter. Sorry. All right, slip stitch to join, and we'll move on to row 5. For row 5, we'll start with our chain 1. Again, we'll place 2 double crochets in that same stitch as your chain. So there's 1. Go back in that same stitch, put your second double crochet. And for this increase, we'll put 1 double crochet in the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, and 3. So we have 2 double crochets in the first stitch, 1 double crochet in the next 3. You'll continue that all the way around. 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. All the way around, and I'll see you at the end. We're at the end of row 5, continuing our increase. So I'm making the smaller hat, so I'm on stitches 46 and 47, which will be in the same stitch. So 2 stitches in that stitch, and then 48, 49, and 50 will be in my last 3 stitches. So there's 48, 49, and 50. We'll slip stitch to join in our first chain, as always. I can dig it in there. Slip stitch to join, end of row 5, and we only have 2 more rows of increase. All right, we're almost there. For row 6, start with our chain 1, as always. Same as we've been doing, we'll put 2 double crochets in this same stitch as our chain. So there's 1, back in that same spot for your second double crochet, and we'll be putting 1 double crochet in the next 4 stitches. So I think you can see how this increase thing works. So there's 1, next stitch we put 1, next stitch we put 1, and then one more time, 1 double crochet. So we have 2 double crochets in our first stitch, 1 double crochet in the next 4. Do this all the way around. You'll have 2 double crochets in this next stitch, and then you'll put 1 double crochet in each of the next 4. 2, and then 1 in the next 4. Do this all the way around, and I'll see you at the end. All right, here's the end of row 6. So my last repeat, I'll have 2 double crochets in this stitch, which for me and the smaller size is 55 and 56. Then I'll put 1 in the next 4, which is 57, 58. Oh, my yarn's tangling up on me. Let's see, 59 and 60 for my last stitch. If you're doing the larger size, you'll have 72 on this row. We'll slip stitch to join in our first chain, and we only have 1 more row of increase. Hallelujah. See you for row 7. All right, final row of increase for our crown. Same thing, chain 1 to begin, 2 double crochets in this same stitch as your chain. So there's 1 and 2. Now for this last row of increase, we'll have 2 in that first stitch, and we'll put 1 double crochet in the next 5 stitches. So there's 1, next stitch 1, next stitch 1, that's 4, and my 5th double crochet. So we have 2 in the first, 1 double crochet in the next 5 stitches. Repeat this all the way around. 2, and then 1 in the next 5. 2, 1 in the next 5. All the way around. See you at the end. So here's the end of row 7, which is the end of our increases, the end of our crown of the hat. So for me, doing the smaller size, this is stitch count 64 and 65, which are in the same stitch. And then my last 5 are 66, 67, 68, 69, and 70. Now if you're doing the larger size hat, at the end of this row, your stitch count should be 84. So let's see, I think that's 67, 68, 69, and 70. We'll slip stitch to join, and we'll be keeping with this gray color instead of changing. We'll start changing after this row. But hooray, we're at the end of our increase. There's the crown of your hat. Row 8 starts the body of our hat, and this is our first puff stitch row. We'll start with the chain 1, and in the first stitch, not your chain stitch, but your first stitch, you insert, pull up, you have 3, do it again, you have 5 loops, do it again, you have 7 loops. 7 loops on your hook. You'll grab your yarn, you'll pull it through all 7 loops. You close your puff stitch with the chain, and then you do another chain. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches and do another puff stitch. Now, if you prefer doing, maybe 9 loops, you can, especially if you're doing the larger size hat. On this smaller one, I do 7 loops, pull it all the way through, close with the chain, 1 more chain, skip 2 spaces, do it again. We'll do this all the way around, puff stitch, 2 chains, skip 2, do it again. I'll see you at the end. Here we are at the end of row 8 where we're doing puffs, 2 chains, skipping 2. So I'll skip 2 stitches, put in my puff stitch, and I know people have different ways of doing this puff stitch. This is just how I do it. Get 7 loops on my hook, draw it all the way through, close it with the chain, do another chain. We skip 2 stitches, which is at the end, and then we will slip stitch to join in that first chain. However, we're going to be changing colors. So I'll show you how to do that on the next row. So at the end of this row, we're going to be changing colors. So when we join with our slip stitch, I just grab my new color, pull it through just like as if I had not changed colors, pull it through just like that, and then just join it with your new color. To me, that's the easiest way. I know everybody has their own way. But it's kind of loosey-goosey where you join and you got all these pieces of yarn. So what I do, since we're changing colors a lot, I'm going to go ahead each time and tie off those 2 pieces of yarn at the end there. It just draws your stitches together, and to me, it just makes it easier. So each row, I'm going to be doing that. All right, so now we have our color, our outline color. We're going to start with chain 1, and our first stitch is a front post single crochet around our puff stitch. So you just insert your hook behind the puff, grab your yarn, pull it through, work your single crochet. Now we have 2 chain stitches here, and we have 2 skip stitches on the previous row. We're going to work in front of that chain and insert our hook into that first skip stitch from the previous row. Working in front of that chain. Grab your yarn, work your double crochet. Now it's not going to be attached to this row, it's attached to the previous row. Then for the second chain stitch we have right here, we'll do a single crochet. Like that. So we have a front post single crochet, a double crochet in the previous row, and a single crochet. We'll do that every time. Let's do it again. Behind that puff, grab your yarn, front post single crochet. We have our 2 chain stitches up here. We have 2 skip stitches down here. We work in front of the chain into that first skip stitch from the previous row and work your double crochet. You're working in front of that chain stitch into the previous row. For your second chain, work a single crochet. I hope y'all can see what I'm doing. You can still see the holes, but as we go down, the holes will fill in. You'll see as we get further along into it. But you work this in every puff stitch. Front post single crochet. You work in front of that chain into the first the first skip stitch from your previous row, and then a single crochet into that second chain. We'll work this all the way around. Every puff stitch be the same thing, and I'll pick you up at the end to see how you're doing. Okay, we're at the end of row 9, which is our first outline row, and we're outlining our puff stitches. So I've got 2 puff stitches left. So we'll go behind that puff stitch, do a front post single, working in front of that chain, going into the first skip stitch from the previous row, work our double crochet, and then a single crochet into that second chain. Alright, here's our last puff stitch of the row. Same thing. Front post single around that puff. It's getting kind of tight, but you can do this. Work in front of the chain, double crochet into that first skip stitch from the previous row, and then a single crochet into this last chain. Might be kind of hard to get into that, just make it work. Alright, that's the end of 9. We'll slip stitch to join, but we're going to be changing colors again, and we'll pick that up on row 10. Okay, so for row 10, we're going to be changing colors again. We're changing colors every row. So this is my second main color of my plaid. I'm using a white. Just grab it, pull it through, and join with the slip stitch. I'm going to go ahead and cut that black one off and tie it off like I'm going to do each time. I'm not going to show you this each time. That'll get boring. But I just think it's easier, makes things tighter. All right, so we're going to basically be repeating row 8 with the puff stitch row. We'll chain 1. Now our first puff will be in our first stitch, which is also that double crochet stitch from our previous row. So we'll work our puff stitch. I'm going to put 7 loops on my hook. You might want to do 9 if you're doing the larger hat. Pull it all the way through, chain 1 to close, and then another chain. Skip 2 stitches, do it again. Every puff stitch will fall into that double crochet that we did on the previous row. That's an easy way to tell if you're putting it in the right stitch. So again, another puff stitch. I got 7 loops. Pull it through all 7. Chain 1 to close. Another chain. Skip 2 stitches, and you're going to be on that double crochet stitch again. We'll work that all the way around. Every time there's a double crochet stitch from the previous row, you're going to put a puff stitch. I'll pick you up at the end. Okay, we're at the end of row 10 where we're working our second row of puff stitches, where each puff stitch is falling on that weird double crochet from the previous row. So this is my last puff stitch of the row. I'm getting 7 loops on my hook. You might want to do 8 or 9, however you prefer. Pull the yarn all the way through. Chain to close. 1 more chain. Okay, we're going to be slip stitching to join through that first chain, and we're going to be changing colors again to our outline row, which for me is black. So every outline row will be black, and then you alternate your other 2 main colors for your puff stitch rows. So I'll pick you up for 11. So before we start 11, we're at the end of 10, we have to change colors again in our slip stitch to join. So this next, our row 11 is going to be an outline stitch row, which is for me black. So I'm changing my colors here, just like I've been doing. Pull all those pieces of yarn to close it, and I'm going to go ahead and tie it off. All right, I've tied off my yarn. Everything's nice and tight. Go ahead and chain 1. Our outline row is just like before. I'm going to start off with a front post single crochet around that puff stitch. We have the 2 chains, we have the 2 skip stitches from the previous row. We work in front of that chain into the first skip stitch from the previous row, work our double crochet. For the second chain stitch, we work a single crochet, just like before. The outline row will be the same every time. Do a front post single crochet around the puff stitch. We work a double crochet into that first skip stitch from the previous row, working in front of the chain. Work your double crochet, and then a single crochet into that second chain. So we're going to be doing this all the way around each puff, same thing as before. I'll pick you up at the end. Okay, we're finishing up row 11, which is another outline stitch row, and I'm on my last repeat here, which is the front post single crochet around that puff stitch. It's kind of tight here, but you can do it. You work your double crochet into the first skip stitch from that previous row. Grab your yarn, work your double crochet, and then just put a single crochet in there however you can. I'm a no stress crocheter and I just make it work. So that's the end of 11. We're going to slip stitch to join, and we're going to go back to our first puff stitch color, which for me is gray. So we're going to be changing colors again. For rows 12 through 23, we're simply repeating the rows that we've just completed. You'll have a puff stitch row, then an outline row, puff stitch row, outline row. You'll alternate colors for your puff stitch rows. Your outline row will always be the same color. Here's how it'll look as you work your way down 12 through 23. So this is basically how yours should look, minus the brim, of course. Alternating colors on your puff stitch rows, and then the outline stitch row. So your last row, 23, was an outline row in black. Now we're going to do this very bottom row, which should be your brim color. I use it the same as my crown, so for me it's gray. So this is row 24. We're going to chain 1, and we're simply going to put a single crochet in each stitch around. Now obviously I haven't done the whole hat. For time's sake, I'm just showing it you like this. So pretend like I'm at the bottom of my hat. This is row 24, and we're putting a single crochet in each stitch around, which will anchor our brim to the hat. So I'll pick you up at here at the end. So we're at the end of row 24, where we're putting a single crochet in each stitch around. And again, this row, it doesn't really show up that much when you're finished, but it's a good way to anchor the brim to your hat without it showing when you've used different colors. So we're going to slip stitch to join. We're going to continue on. Oh, if I can get it through. There it is. We're going to continue on with this same color, so no need to cut your yarn. All right, let's start our brim. You can make your brim any length you want. We're going to work straight out from the bottom of our hat. I think my instructions say to chain 10. You can do however many. I'll probably just do 9, but 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, however many chains you want, depending on the width you want your brim. So I'm chaining out. I think that's 9. And then what we're going to do is work a single crochet in each chain back down, just for this very first time. It's kind of awkward. You don't have a lot to work with, and I've got big hands and long fingers, so I'm fumbling around here. But you work one single crochet in each stitch all the way back down to the edge of your hat. Okay, make sure you get it in that last one. Sometimes you have to sort of cram it in. But there we go. So that's our first little bit of brim. Now when we've reached the back to the bottom of our hat, we're going to slip stitch, but not in the stitch we're in, The next 2 stitches we will slip stitch to join our brim to the hat. So there's the first slip stitch, oops, and then slip stitch into that next stitch as well. So we're doing 2 slip stitches. We'll chain 1, we'll turn, we'll work our way back up. All right, from here on out, when we're working up and down, we're working in the back loop only. You see that? Stick your hook into that back loop and do a single crochet. So it's a single crochet back loop only when we're going up and down these little pieces of brim. Again, it's a little awkward at first because you don't have a whole lot to hold on to, but we work a single crochet back loop only until you get to the last stitch. Okay, I think I got a couple of more here. It gets easier as you go along because you'll have more to hold on to. Okay, so we're at the, oh, now I got one more. All right, single crochet back loop only. Now we're at the end. For the last stitch, you do a regular single crochet, not back loop only. Stick it, well, if I can hold on to it, stick it through both pieces of your stitch like a regular single crochet. That's for the end stitch only. You'll chain 1 and then you'll turn your work. Once again, on that end stitch, we'll do a regular single crochet. It's the only time you do that. And then we'll back loop only single crochet back down to the edge of our hat. So back loop only right there. Can you see that? Back loop only. Stick your hook in, work your single crochet. Now, people have their own ways of doing brims. This is just the way I do it. This way of doing it like this gives you that ribbed look, and it's very stretchy, and I like it a lot. All right, cram it in that last one, back loop only. We've reached our hat again, so not the stitch you're in, but the next 2 stitches you'll slip stitch. And again, this is just attaching your brim to the edge of the hat. So here's our second slip stitch. You chain 1, you turn your work. It's getting a little bit easier because you have something to hold on to. Single crochet back loop only all the way up, and then you just repeat that all the way around until you reach the end. When you reach the end, you just turn your hat inside out, you slip stitch those 2 short edges of your brim together, and here's your hat. I think it looks fantastic, and I hope y'all have enjoyed making this hat as much as I've enjoyed showing you how. If you like this tutorial, please hit subscribe because there's always going to be more to come. And I'd like to dedicate this tutorial in loving memory of my mom, who sadly passed away earlier this year. Until next time, happy hooking.